2 years ago, I came upon this road, following the buffalo. But the soldiers fired on us, and since that time there has been a noise like that of a thunderstorm, and we have not known which way to go.
The Lewis and Clark expedition of the early 1800s was the first overland American expedition to the Pacific coast and back. The findings of that journey and others paved the way for a U.S. government policy that focused on westward expansion. At the time, indigenous people were allowed to live east of the Mississippi River as long as they adopted American ways. The U.S. government wanted tribes to give up their cultural traditions and live an agricultural lifestyle.
You are becoming farmers, learning the use of the plow and the hoe. You are also raising cattle and hogs for your food. Be assured, the further you advance in it, the happier and more respectable you will be.
If the Great Spirit had desired me to be a white man, he would have made me so in the first place. He put in your heart certain wishes and plans. In my heart, he put other and different desires.
For policymakers, the presence of American Indians was a threat that stood in the way of progress. With President Andrew Jackson's signing of the Indian Removal Act in 1830, the government began to negotiate removal treaties with several tribes.
The consequences of a speedy removal will free them from the power of the states, enable them to pursue happiness in their own way, and through the influence of good counsels, to cast off their habits and become an interesting, civilized, and Christian community.
The white men of the East, whose numbers are like the sand of the sea, will overrun and take possession of this country. They will build wigwams and villages all over this land, and their domain will extend from sea to sea.
As the nation healed from the Civil War, ambitious businessmen and politicians looked west. In Kansas, routes such as the Smoky Hill Trail were established to convey travelers and goods westward. Railroad companies soon forged tracks along these routes. By the mid-1850s, Arapahoes, Cheyennes, Comanches, Kiowas, Pawnees, and Sioux had been living in western Kansas for hundreds of years. For the tribes that hunted or lived in these lands, the arrival of the new Americans set the stage for a clash of cultures. Invasion of the land and the near depletion of buffalo herds elevated tensions and erupted in violence on both sides. During the Sand Creek Massacre of 1864, volunteers from the Colorado militia killed and mutilated hundreds of Cheyennes and Arapahoes in an unprovoked attack. Prior to the massacre, Cheyenne Chief Black Kettle had been negotiating peace with the U.S. government. 3 years later, an event known as the Kidder Massacre occurred when a group of soldiers led by 2nd Lieutenant Lyman Kidder encountered a group of Cheyennes and Sioux. The soldiers' mutilated bodies were found 2 weeks later, north of Fort Wallace. Forts were established to enforce U.S. control of the frontiers. Soldiers worked to keep peace between settlers, Indian tribes, and railroad workers. In western Kansas, Forts Harker, Larned, Dodge, Wallace, and Fletcher, later renamed Fort Hays, were built for that purpose. However, the Army's presence at these forts and the surrounding areas only aggravated tensions with the tribes. Thousands of Kiowa, Comanche, Plains Apache, Southern Cheyenne, and Southern Arapaho people gathered in October 1867 to negotiate the Medicine Lodge Peace Treaty with the U.S. This resulted in the relocation of the tribes to Indian Territory, or present-day Oklahoma.
We are your best friends, and now, before all the good lands are taken by whites, we wish to set aside a part of them for your exclusive home. You must have a place you can call your own.
You said that you wanted to put us upon a reservation, to build houses and to make us medicine lodges. I do not want them. I was born where there were no enclosures and where everything drew a free breath. I want to die there and not within walls.
Treaties with the U.S. government caused rifts within some tribes. A group of warriors known as the Cheyenne Dog Soldiers split into their own band. During the summer of 1868, they and other tribes attacked immigrant settlements in Kansas, Colorado, and Texas. In November of that year, the U.S. Army launched a winter campaign to punish the tribes for these attacks. Cheyenne Chief Black Kettle was camped with his tribe within the Cheyenne Reservation on the Washita River in central Oklahoma. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and the 7th Cavalry attacked the camp. Eyewitnesses estimated between 50 and 100 Cheyennes and 21 7th Cavalry soldiers were killed. Among the casualties were Black Kettle and his wife. The events at Washita led other Southern Cheyennes to move to the government-appointed reservation. These back-and-forth attacks continued in Kansas, but mostly on a smaller scale until the late 1870s. As more tribes moved to reservations, conflicts declined, the need for frontier military forts decreased, and nearly all western Kansas frontier forts were closed by 1889. Americans continued to move west, and the dreams of Jackson and Jefferson of occupying the land from sea to shining sea were realized.
And we, when the interests and passions of the day are past, shall look back upon it, I fear, with self-reproach and a regret as bitter as unavailing.